As we gather today, it is important to acknowledge that the lands we all occupy today are indigenous lands. We acknowledge that the Napa Valley College and the surrounding Napa Valley sit on the unceded, traditional, ancestral, and contemporary homelands of the Onatsatis, Patwin, Miwok, and Pomo peoples, lands taken via genocide and forced removal. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Onatsatis, Patwin, Miwok, and Pomo communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations, and as well as acknowledging the indigenous communities in the area where you may be today if you're not currently in the Napa Valley. So thank you for that. And before I pass on the mic to my colleague, Dr. Hansen here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit, just very briefly about Dr. Maria Peralta. She's currently a technical director at an industrial hygiene company in the Bay Area called Assay Technology, which Dr. Hansen and her were just talking about. She's born, raised here in California as a Mexican American with roots in the Bay Area. And I did have an opportunity to talk with Dr. Peralta a few weeks ago, and we really got to touch base on some of the similarities and differences, right, between our journeys. And she's going to delve more deeper into that during her talk here today. And as so many of you already read the bio, and so I won't touch on that much either, because it's going to come out in her story. And I just want to say that just from our conversation, I know that anybody here today, students, colleagues, community members, will benefit from connecting to Dr. Peralta's story. And so I really hope that's the case, and I'm very confident it will be. And so, listen, have some questions as well. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Hansen, because he knows Dr. Peralta well. And so I really would love for him to share a few words of introduction before he passes the mic on to Dr. Peralta. So please, Dr. Hansen.
Thanks, Luis. I wanted to bring up a couple things I think Maria would be maybe too humble to bring up. So I met Maria in 2011, which most of you guys were born before that. We TA'd several times together, and we've been friends since, over our mutual love of 3 p.m. coffee breaks. When we TA'd, that's actually when I found out that I really like teaching, and I think Maria did too. She was very good at it, but unfortunately for students everywhere, she chose industry. So you guys are stuck with me. Me and Maria and our friend Phil, we all were roommates for a year. It was great. Maria helped me fix my dating profile, which was something I needed before Tinder. And that's actually how I met my wife. So Maria is a dual threat, both a chemical and social savant. So Maria, on the professional side, she was always the de facto adult in her lab. She was the one that would be aware and kind enough to tell someone when they need to get their shit together. And that was like Maria. I unfortunately never was able to work directly with Maria in a research capacity, but many of my friends did. And they told me, Maria's who you go to if you need help, if you need expertise. Like, she's someone you could rely on and trust to both technical and just like life advice. So I'm really glad that Maria came here to speak to us, because a wonderful colleague and a good friend. Maria.
Yes, so thanks, Josh, for that. It's funny that you bring up the dating profile thing, because I had totally forgot about that until you brought it up a few weeks ago. And I was like, you know what? Yes, you are right. I will take all the credit for that. So I guess we'll just kind of jump into it. Luis, if I'm right, I'm just going to share my screen. I have, our PowerPoint presentation that I put together for you guys. Okay, so. Let me get this going. All right, I have to do the obligatory. You guys can see my screen, right? Okay, great. So as Luis and Dr. Hansen said, This is, I'm here to give you guys kind of a talk of my journey. And so this is the STEM speaker series titled Cultivamos con Cariño. My name is Maria Peralta. And then I just took a quick picture from your guys's poster here. So I'm just going to, sorry, need to move some things around on my desktop. Okay. I wanted to talk about an outline. I always like to let people know what we're going to talk about before jumping into it. And so the image that you see on the right-hand side here is just taken from your guys's poster. And so to me, there's two parts to this talk. There is the science part, the MESA and the STEM part, and then there's the cultural part, so the Cultivamos con Cariño. And so the way I split that up is for the science part, I want to talk about my professional path. Obviously, everyone's path is different. I want to give you an insight as to how I got here. And then really kind of the gray area, the harder area for me personally is the cultural part. Kind of just talking about my cultural path, how I navigated my schooling, and then also just some general awareness, knowing who you are, especially in certain fields where you look around and people may not look like you, people may not talk like you, like how do you navigate that? And so, sorry, I just want to make sure I want to see my entire, there you go. That's better. Okay, so my professional path. So I am born and raised in California, specifically the Bay Area. So I lived and was raised in San Jose, California. I went to public school, starting from kindergarten all the way to high school. And then after that, I went to a private college called St. Mary's College of California. And so I was there from 2004 to 2008. This was back when, you could sign up for a 4-year program and actually finish a program in 4 years. So from there, I graduated with a bachelor's in science and chemistry. I worked as a chemist at a small company in the Bay Area called SP3 Diamond Technologies. They're still around. They're a semi-conductor company, and I was there from 2008 to 2010. I then after that attended UC Davis from 2010 to 2017, where I received my PhD in organic chemistry with an emphasis in biotechnology. After that, I began working at the company that I'm currently at, Assay Technology. I started there in 2017, and I'm still there now, so about 5 years. This is actually a picture that you see here. This is a picture of the day that I graduated. So that's a little special for me. Okay, so I talked about going to grad school, and this is kind of just like my public service announcement. Find out about grad school. Grad school was actually something I wasn't quite aware of, so I make it a point to talk about, hey, grad school exists. So I wasn't aware of grad school until I was about a junior in college. I don't know if that's because I just didn't come across it or I wasn't interested in it at that point. It could have been a cultural thing too. College was just kind of what we focused on. I was being a first generation Mexican American. I am the first person in my family to go to college. I am for sure the first person to go to grad school. And so I just want to make sure everyone out there is aware that grad school is an option, but also, grad school is not for everyone. It's extremely hard. You have to make sure it's what you want in order to go to grad school. But if you're interested, this is just my PSA about it. So grad school is a continuation of your schooling to obtain a higher degree. So master's, PhD, law degree, there's various forms of graduate school. I just want you to know that it exists. And for the physical sciences, so for like Josh and I, we got our PhDs In the physical sciences, I specifically did chemistry, so organic chemistry. The way it's set up is they pay you a stipend. So unlike medical school where you pay for it, you hear about student debt and things like that, you actually get paid. And the reason you get paid is because you work directly with the professor. You work with them in the lab. And so the way that the grad school, at least that I went to and that Josh went to as well, is you continue some classes, but the classes are directly related to your major. So as an organic chemist, I took only organic chemistry courses. There's no general ed or anything like that. You perform research with your professor, and your professor applies for grants and things. And within that grant, there's a written stipend for the student. So that's how you get paid. And as Josh had mentioned, you could also become a teacher's assistant while you're doing the research. So, you get some experience across the board, and you are provided with a stipend. While we were there, I want to say it was like 30 to 40,000. It's different for every school. Just know it exists. It's enough money to kind of live on, but at least, you don't end up with a lot of school debt. Okay, so back to kind of the talk that I was talking about. One big question that I got a lot while I was doing my schooling, and that I still get now, is why did you choose science? Why chemistry? People are like, just like, they have no idea why I would ever make that decision. And it's funny, the field that I get that a lot is like, let's say I go to a doctor's appointment and it's a new doctor, and they ask me what I do, and I say, oh, I'm a chemist. Most medical doctors flat out say, oh my gosh, I hated chemistry. Oh my gosh, organic chemistry was the worst. It was my least favorite class. And it's like, okay, maybe don't tell me that while you're my doctor, right? So it's just funny. But so the major influence really started in high school. My high school science teacher, I still remember her very vividly, Miss Radhakrishnan. She was actually a teacher with Teach for America, and it's a program that you can sign up for where it's this community, and they put recently graduated students or whoever applies they go out in the United States, and they tend to go to communities that are lower funded. They tend to be more minority, low income communities. And so she was my science teacher in high school, and I just absolutely loved her passion for science. Like, she just made it so fun, and that really stuck with me after the class I had with her. So when I was applying to colleges, in my head, I was either going to choose accounting or chemistry, and I know they're two totally different aspects. But I had taken 2 courses in high school for accounting, and it seemed fine. Numbers, very straightforward, nothing tricky really about it. And then there was chemistry, which I just really, really liked and wanted to know more about. Luckily, I chose chemistry. But when I was applying to colleges, I applied to 3 schools overall. So I know sometimes it can be really popular to apply to like 8, 10, 12 schools. But that can be very limiting on, on a budget. Every application, I remember it was at least like $60. And if you don't have the money to apply to 8 schools, yeah, you can't really do that. So I applied to 3 schools. I did like a safety school, considering my GPA, my extracurriculars. I knew it was a school that I could safely get into, that I could always fall back on. And then I applied to 2 other schools, so Santa Clara University and St. Mary's College. I eventually ended up going to St. Mary's for 2 main reasons. One, St. Mary's actually gave me a bigger financial aid package, so it was cheaper for me to attend there. But I vividly remember a conversation I had with my dad when my acceptance letter for Santa Clara came in, and he said, well, if you go to Santa Clara, it's like 20 minutes away from my parents' house. He said, you can live at home. You don't have to live there because you're so close. And my heart dropped. My both of my parents are from Mexico. I grew up in a very strict household, and there was no way I was going to have your traditional American college experience if I had to live at home. And I remember just being like, well, I'm obviously not going to Santa Clara then. But also St. Mary's just ended up giving me more money, so that helped. So I went to St. Mary's, and in May of 2008, I graduated with my bachelor's in science and chemistry. And one guaranteed thing I can tell you about that is I was absolutely burned out. I was done going to school. I had been going to school since I was in kindergarten. I hadn't taken any breaks or anything. Straight out of high school, I went to undergrad. I was done. I wanted to work. I wanted to actually make some money. So as I was graduating, I started applying to jobs. And so remember, this is 2008. And starting in 2008 is what's labeled the Great Recession. So according to Investopedia, 2008 is considered the most significant downturn since the Great Depression. There was just layoffs across the board. People were not hiring. So I was applying to anything and everything that I could remotely do. Luckily, there was this company, SP3 Diamond Technologies. They had an application out for an internship. So it was going to start out as an internship with the possibility of continuing full time, if it ended up working out. And so luckily it did. And so what I did there was I was essentially a diamond chemist. And we synthesized thin film diamond coatings onto various surfaces. So the picture you see on the bottom left here, those are drill bits. And so, there's a lot more science involved. But essentially these drill bits, we would etch the surface of them. We would do some coating, initial coating of them, and then we would actually stick them in the reactor that you see which is the image on the right-hand side. We could control the gases that went inside. We can control the pressure, and we would grow diamond films on surfaces. Another thing that we did was the middle picture that you see here, that's actually a silicon wafer. So again, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, semi-conductor. So there's various reasons why you would want a thin diamond film on a silicon wafer for further processing. And so the rainbow coating that you see there, that's actually a really, really thin film of diamond. So while I was working, I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I got accepted to UC Davis, and I was there from 2010 to 2017. That was not the plan. I did not want to spend 7 years of grad school, but that's just how, it worked out. I'll talk about kind of, success and straight lines and things like that in a bit. But I graduated with my PhD in organic chemistry and an emphasis in biotechnology. So when I first got into grad school, initially I was in the NAMBR lab, and in that lab we did small peptide synthesis in hopes of using them as inhibitors as treatments for Alzheimer's disease. And so that was really interesting, but for various reasons, I ended up having to change the lab that I was in. Which is not a common thing in graduate school. It happens. Again, my success is not a straight line. So I changed over to the Tony lab, and that's where I ended up graduating from. And the title of my dissertation is Design, Engineering, and Application of an Amyloidogenic Protein, SBAFPM1, for use in nanotechnological applications. So it's a very long title. I'm very proud of it. I actually have a copy here to kind of keep me humble, keep me remember of all the hard work that I did. So, and because this, part of this talk is STEM related, I want to go into a little bit of the science of that. So, I'm sure there's people across the sciences here, so I'll kind of talk about this in general terms. The image that you see here is taken directly from the first paper that I published with first paper that I published in the Tony lab. And so really what I was working on with this project was protein engineering. The overall idea was we wanted to take a protein, engineer it so that it was a certain shape, and hopefully incorporate some aspects into it so that it could self-assemble into these really long protein strings with very little outside input. And so the protein that you see here, we dubbed SB501. It's actually a naturally occurring antifreeze protein found in a worm. And it has a really cool shape. It's in the shape of a triangle. Um, and the naturally occurring protein actually helps this worm survive sub-zero temperatures. It's thought to actually grab onto the beginning formations of an ice crystal and bend the crystal so that way that the ice doesn't pierce through the worm and kill it. So the only reason we chose it was because we liked the structure of it. And so the wild type is the top left structure. And so this was actually a lot of computer work that I did in the beginning of my project. So I took the protein and started to mutate some of the things, delete amino acids, add amino acids to really make it the building block that I wanted, which is this purple structure that you see here. But kind of at the end, I was left with something that was way too small. You know, think of it like the tiniest Lego block. There's not much you can do with it. So I actually doubled it in size so it could be a little longer and more workable. And that's what you see is this final structure on the right-hand side. And I added a few amino acids so that in hopes of these little building blocks self-assembling, and that's the interface is what you see here on the bottom image. So hopefully just through some hydrogen bonding, some van der Waals, things like that, salt bridging between the amino acids, we can actually have two of these monomers, two of these small building blocks line up and become protein strings, okay? And so for the paper and for this project, I actually did that with two proteins. So I talked about the triangle protein from the worm, and the other protein that we found, which I really liked, was the structure of kind of like a soft rectangle. And so that's what you see here on the bottom, which is 3ULT. So that that protein actually comes from grass. A grass that is native to Canada. And again, it's an antifreeze protein, so it helps that grass survive the snowy winter in Canada and not freeze to death. So again, I went through the protein engineering. So once the computer side of this project was done, then I went into kind of the wet lab side of it, where we did some recombinant protein expression using bacterial cell lines. And then there was a lot of protein expression and protein purification, and then finding out ideal settings where this monomer, this one building block, if we could change kind of the environment slightly, it would then self-assemble into a string. And we were actually really, really successful. And so the image that you see on the right-hand side is in, I want to say it's SEM, so scanning electron microscopy. And the scale bar that you have here, this is 1 micron. And the tiny building blocks of this protein, I want to say, was about 5 nanometers. And so by increasing the concentration to an ideal level, increasing the temperature just slightly above room temp, we were able to allow these proteins to self-assemble into these protein strings. And so the idea behind this project was, our computers and our phones are getting thinner and smaller. Everyone wants, that really thin phone. Well, all the components inside of your electronics need to become thinner as well, right? So, if we could use things like proteins that are really, really small and make wires out of them, then we can continue with these electronics becoming smaller and thinner. So after grad school, I was hired as the Associate Technical Director at Assay Technology. And, about a year after that, I was promoted to the technical director. So as the technical director, I oversee any and all technical aspects of our products and our lab testing facilities. So the image that you see on the top left, these are called diffusive monitors. And what they do is they actually collect air within a breathing zone of a person. And so there are federal regulations saying that a person cannot be around certain levels of toxic chemicals for a certain period of time because it's highly unsafe for the body. So for instance, formaldehyde. Federal regulations say that a worker within an 8-hour work shift cannot be around formaldehyde that is higher than 0.75 parts per million. And so you want to keep your workers safe, you can purchase our product. You wear it within your breathing zone for your work shift. As open as you see here, it collects the air as you're working. And once you're done, you close it up, you send it back to us. And we have a few labs that can analyze it. And we can tell you, okay, this is the level of formaldehyde that that person that was wearing it was around. And there's various chemicals that we do that with. The large image that you see here on the right-hand side, that is a unit of Assay Technology called Miller-Nelson Labs, and I directly oversee that lab. And so what we do there is we actually test gas masks. So if you've ever seen anyone wear a gas mask, they usually have these cartridges on them. And so how do you know a gas mask works? How do you know it's protecting you against whatever hazardous gas that it's rated for? Well, a lot of companies will send that to us and we can test them against tear gas, chlorine gas, hydrogen cyanide, chemicals like that. So we're kind of a testing facility for those companies. And then the third part of the company is the image that you see on the bottom left here. This is called the Miller-Nelson instrument. And so we use that to make a conditioned airstream at a specific flow rate, temperature, and relative humidity. And you need that in order to test some of these cartridges. Okay, so that was the professional path. Now let's get into more of the fun stuff, the gray area where how did I successfully perform my schooling and keep my culture or survive in my culture. Again, I am a first generation Mexican American. Both of my parents were born in Mexico. I was raised in a very, very strict household. My father was in the Marine Corps. There was a lot of rules, a lot of things going on. My parents come from nothing but love, but it is what it is. So going to school, there's a lot of questions that you get from my community, that Mexican American, that Mexican community. When I went back to school, it was like, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to go to school, more school? And it's like, people don't know. They don't know about more schooling. They don't know why I would want to do this. I remember being in undergrad and, my tios, my tias, my cousins, my parents would be like, well, are you coming home for so-and-so's baptism? The party's on Saturday. We're having dinner on Tuesday. Your Theo's coming. Are you coming? And it's like, I'm an hour away. I have class tomorrow morning at 8. I can't come home for a dinner because my Theo's gonna be there, Also, well, what are you gonna do after? Some people would be like, oh, are you gonna go back to school? And it's like, well, maybe. These are just kind of like open-ended questions, and it's just like, it can drive you crazy. And then as a Mexican woman, there's the y el novio, or where's the boyfriend, where's the girlfriend? It's like, oh my gosh, I just want to go to school. I just want to get my degree. And then also, los niños, when are you going to have kids? And when I went to grad school, I was 25, and when I graduated grad school, I was about 32. So as a 32-year-old Mexican American woman that is not married and no kids, oh my gosh, that is crazy, right? So it was hard to navigate these questions from my culture, from my community. But really what it comes down to is people fear what they don't know. if your parents have no idea what college is, it's going to be scary, and they're sending their kids off to that, to this unknown land. And so people are scared about what they don't know. It wasn't easy trying to navigate all of my schooling and my family life. But really, it comes down to the question, was it worth it? Is it worth it? And so the next few slides are going to be me talking about opportunities that I've had that I believe have absolutely made it worth it to go through all of my schooling, you know, from a professional level, from a cultural level as well. So I love to travel. I found, we tried to travel as much as we could when I was younger, and it's just something that stuck with me. And so, um, being in the sciences, one opportunity that has it has given me was to travel. So I've highlighted some of the places here in the United States where I've been able to go solely because of my schooling. So whether that's an undergrad or graduate school, or because of my jobs with conferences and things. And so I've traveled some through California. There's conferences are kind of all over the United States. I've been to one in Washington, a few in Florida, Texas, Minnesota, New York. Um, and these are all paid for, either through grants or through my jobs. They want you to go to these conferences. So this is a huge opportunity that I absolutely took advantage of. And I've also been able to do some international travel. So when I was at St. Mary's, I did a study abroad program to Australia. And so that's the map that you see here. And so I was there for about 6-7 months, going to school, studying chemistry, living in the dorms there. And that was just amazing. I highly recommend everyone go to if you have an office on campus about studying abroad, go to it, just find out. And also with another study abroad that I was able to do in undergrad was in Spain. So I was able to go to Spain for a month and study the art and architecture of Spain. It was amazing. And then through graduate school and my job now at Assay Technology, I've been able to do some international conferences. And so that's taken me to Italy, Germany, and Iceland. So as far as opportunities go, how did I take advantage of these opportunities, and how did I bring my culture with me? So there's a saying in Spanish, échale ganas, which roughly translates to give it maximum effort. And that has been a huge theme for me, just give it as much effort as you can, as you have at that moment. So whether I was in undergrad or working or in graduate school, I was constantly looking for opportunities, actively looking for opportunities. So it's not like, I was checking my email waiting for the opportunity to land in my inbox or waiting for someone to approach me with an opportunity. I was on Google. I was looking up research opportunities as an undergraduate student, conferences that I could potentially go to and get my program to pay for it. So you have to actively look for these opportunities that, again, make those sacrifices absolutely worth it. So you have to find the opportunities and actively seek out people that could potentially connect you. So if your school or your campus has offices for either study abroad or financial aid or whatever kind of opportunity that you're looking for, go to that office, go talk to people. If they can't directly connect you to what you want, maybe they know someone that can connect you. It takes work to actually get these opportunities, and then apply. I know this is hard, deadlines, everyone has deadlines, everyone has things to do, but if you don't apply, then you never know, right? They can't tell you yes until you apply. And the worst thing that can happen if you apply is they say no, and you're in the exact same position that you are now. And also just show up. That can be hard too. When I studied abroad in Australia, I was like, I'll just apply. We'll see what happens. And then they accepted me. And then I had to show up. I had to show up with my 2 suitcases in Australia by myself. I knew nobody. But it was one of the best times in my life. I still have friends in Australia that I talk to after all this time. So, apply and show up and see what happens. So that's all really great to have these opportunities. But a warning that I would say is it's very, very easy to get lost. Get lost and forget who you are, who you want to be, and where you come from. So kind of just a fair warning, go out there, get these opportunities, but you may have a feeling of getting lost. And so there was a few things that I found myself doing every time I felt like I was getting lost. And the easiest way to do that is to, or to kind of like not get lost, is to bring your culture with you. And sometimes that can be scary, especially if you're looking around and the people around you don't look like you, don't have the same melanin in your skin as you. But like I say, just show up, just do it. So there's a few easy ways that you can bring your culture with you throughout these opportunities. Obviously, pictures and little trinkets. If you want to bring that picture of the Virgen Maria, the Virgin Mary that your mom probably has in her house, if you want to bring that to your dorm room, do it. Don't be shy about it. Bring pictures of your family. At least for my culture, the Mexican culture, the family unit is really, really important. So, I'm not shy about talking about my family or bringing up my family or having pictures of my family around when I was, you know, kind of just looking at these opportunities. The easy part, food and music. Play the music that your parents would play on weekend mornings when they're cleaning the house. That's a great, easy way to get yourself back to your culture. And styled. So this is a small way, but one way that was really important for me. So in this can actually be really hard in the STEM field. So as a chemist working in a wet lab, I obviously can't really have my hair down, because if I'm working with a Bunsen burner and there's an open flame and I have a lot of product in my hair, that's not safe. But there's little ways that you can incorporate your culture into your style. So at least one thing for me, like being a Mexican American in the Bay Area in California, I'm not wearing any right now, but hoop earrings, like that is just, to me, the epitome style of being a Mexican American. So I wear them all the time. I wear them to work and things like that, and it's really great. And then another thing is just reroute yourself. This was really important for me to do in graduate school and in undergrad. I would just get lost. So I would go home for a weekend, try not to do a lot of homework, and sit down and have that morning cup of coffee with my parents and reroute myself, go talk to my tios, go see my cousins and things like that. Okay, so let's talk about resilience and success. There's this idea that to be resilient means to work hard and to persevere through hard times, which can be true. But as long as you're resilient, that has to equal success, right? And I kind of push back on this subject. Success looks different for everybody. Hardly is it ever a straight line. That's kind of what this image says here. People can have a lot of blind turns. Sorry, my headphones are about to run out. People can have a lot of blind turns, a lot of U-turns, and things like that. So your resilience, your success does not look like the person sitting next to you, or the person that is teaching you, or anything like that. Everyone's is different. So I really want to explore this idea. After this talk, I want everyone to kind of think about this idea that in order to obtain real success, you have to be resilient. You have to have gone through hard times. I think it's important that we stop glorifying this idea. It's tiring being resilient. Why do we always have to be resilient? Why can't we just have a little bit of hard times and still, have success, still be feel good in our success. So success looks different for everyone. It's kind of what the image on the right hand says. There's different pathways that we can take, and everyone's going to have a different path, and that's okay. Also, awareness of who you are. I think that's really important. So how do you figure out who you are? That's a really hard question. For me, the way I do that is I ask myself, what do I want? First of all, it's okay to not know. It's okay to kind of just think about that question. And then also, this is actually going to change in different platforms of your life. So let's take myself as an example. In my adult life, I kind of separate it into 4 different platforms. So undergrad, working with my bachelor's, graduate school, and working with my doctorate. So in undergrad, what I really, really wanted was autonomy. Remember, my dad said I had to live at home if I went to Santa Clara. Definitely wasn't doing that. I wanted autonomy. But also I was kind of just that basic survival. Undergrad is hard. I was working 30 to 40-hour work weeks, going to school full time. So I found myself doing a lot of rerouting, kind of just feeling lost, going home, re-energizing, and then coming back. I was also looking for a lot of opportunities. And then at the end of my undergrad, I knew I was burned out. So I did not want to do any more schooling. So at that point, that's who I was. When I was working with my bachelor's, I finally had money. And so I really wanted to explore. I ended up living at home when I was working with my bachelor's. And so I started craving a lot more freedom. Because remember, my house was pretty strict. And then also I wanted more. I wanted more on a professional level. And so that's one thing that really pushed me towards graduate school. And when I was in graduate school, what I wanted was to work. I wanted to work really, really hard towards that degree. I was also looking for autonomy. A lot of graduate school work is kind of just working on your own. I did have some rerouting in graduate school, not as much as undergrad. I think just having gone through undergrad, I kind of knew what to expect. I knew how to reroute myself without, having to go home every weekend. And now that I'm working with my PhD, what I really want is balance. I want a work-life balance. I want peace and quiet. I love having my quiet house. I still like to explore, still like to travel, and then obviously family is important to me, but I still have this very strong desire to work. And so careers and pathways, I've talked to you guys about my careers and pathways, but I talked about it kind of in a linear sense. So let's talk about it, how it really happened. So after I got my bachelor's in chemistry, or actually while I was getting my bachelor's, I ended up doing different types of chemistry. So I did some surfactant chemistry work. I also worked in an inorganic chemistry lab, but I always thought that medicinal chemistry sounded really cool. So that's something I wanted to get into. Like I was hoping to get a job in the medicinal chemistry field. That didn't end up working out. So I ended up being a diamond chemist somehow, right? Which is not like very common or something you really hear about. So as I was a diamond chemist, I wanted to go back to school, and I was like, okay, this is the great time to go back into that medicinal chemistry field. Like if I can choose the science I want, now's the time to do it. Again, that didn't happen. So I ended up getting my PhD in organic chemistry. So I really focused on protein sciences. I kind of went through my dissertation with you guys. And while I was in grad school, I found this opportunity to do an emphasis in biotechnology, which is really huge in the Bay Area. So I figured, okay, this is great. I love the Bay Area. I love the culture, the different cultures that are in the Bay Area. I want to stay here. This is going to allow me to get a really good job here. So I wanted a job in protein sciences as I was graduating. Biotech is huge here. This is perfect. I've lined it up perfectly for myself. That didn't happen. I ended up getting a job as an industrial hygiene chemist and being a technical director of this company. So my pathway has absolutely not been straight. I haven't really ended up where I thought I wanted, but am I happy? And so again, kind of the previous slide of what do I want? I want balance. I want family. I want to work, peace and quiet. So I'm actually really happy with my job. Um, I still absolutely miss proteins. Protein sciences are kind of in the news every day right now, especially with COVID. All of that was, directly what I did in graduate school. Um, but this job allows the balance that I want in my life, and it allows me to be who I am. I had my daughter 2 years ago. She's two, and I never went back full time. I am working 30 hours a week, and my company is just a really great company. They're very accommodating, and they're absolutely fine with me working 30 hours a week. And come 4 o'clock every day, I clock out because it's time for me to go be mom. And that's what I want, and that's what this allows me to do. So I'm actually really happy with the non-straight pathway that I've taken. So in review, I want to make sure we have enough time for any kind of side conversations or questions that we may have. So we talked about my professional path. Again, this is purely my experience. We also talked about my cultural path, navigating all of the schooling that I did, and the culture, my culture. We talked about some resilience, the idea of the resilience, and knowing who you are, and different careers and different pathways. So some of the big takeaways that I hope you guys take from this is know who you are. Ask yourself what makes you happy, and hopefully that helps answer that question. Bring your culture with you in the smallest of ways, whether that's wearing earrings, wearing a red lipstick, putting the Virgin Mary picture, on your wall, whatever it may be. Don't be shy to take time to reroute yourself, and that's going to look different for everybody. For me, that really looked like going home on the weekends and having that morning cup of coffee with my parents and just listening to them talk, listening to my tias talk, eating the pan dulce. That's what rerouting looks like for me. For other people, it may be camping in nature or hanging out with your cat, whatever it may be. Also take the opportunities. It's scary, but take them. The worst that can happen is you don't like it, and you kind of just you say you tried it. And remember that success is not a straight line. Do not compare your success or your resiliency to the person sitting next to you, to your boss, your teacher, or anything like that, okay? So I really want to thank you guys for your time and attention. A special thank you to Louise and Dr. Hansen for the invite. I really had a good time making this presentation. Hopefully we can have some questions and have a good conversation with the time that's remaining. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and give it back over to Luis.
Muchas gracias, Maria. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us. Beautiful journey at that, and for all like your suggestions as well. And when you're talking about your hoops earlier, like it reminded me of some of my friends who related, or I think I even seen a presentation on us on hoop energy, right? It just like the whole yeah, it's beautiful. So but yeah, this is a good opportunity to ask Dr. Peralta some questions, dive a little deeper into something you may be curious about, or even just unmute yourself and provide a comment. And if you're shy, I understand. You could put something in the chat box, and I wouldn't mind. I don't mind at all reading it as well. Any questions out there? And feel free to unmute yourself as well, and just and ask away as well.
I just wanted to thank you for that, Dr. Peralta. It was really inspiring.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes, Nathan?
Yep. When you got finished with your undergrad and you started your job, how different was it from what you learned and what you used on the job? Or did they teach you anything, or was there like a huge switch in between?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the science platform, right? I had science foundation. So with chemistry, chemistry isn't really something you can pick up on the job. You have to know your foundations. You have to know carbon will have 4 bonds, things like that. So I definitely was able to use that, but I had no idea how to synthesize carbon. I had no idea how to use these instruments, with the pressure and things like that. So a lot of it and most of it is you just learn on the job, but you use the foundations that you learned in school to apply ideas. If this is the project that you want to do, you have to figure out how to do it, and you use the foundations that you learned on how to do that job, but you're doing it at that job. You're not doing it in school.
Okay. So was it like a huge difference, like what they taught you, or is it just like added on to what you already
It
knew?
was added on. It was for sure. It's like, hey, I have my foundations in chemistry. Let's add in all this highly specific other chemistry that is specific to diamond. So, I learned all about diamond things, and as well as like some semiconductor things, because it was a semiconductor company. So you have your foundation. That's really what your degree is about. Is like, hey, this is the foundation that I have on this certain subject. And then, the job is supposed to teach you what they want you to do. Kind of the same thing when I got my job at Assay Technology after my graduate school. So I spent 7 years becoming an absolute expert in protein sciences, in amino acids and protein engineering and recombinant protein expression. And I do none of that now. Absolutely none of it. But I have the foundations of a PhD level education that I can apply to this other type of science.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Maria, one question I had, and first, that was an amazing presentation. I learned
Thank you.
a lot about you. You talked a lot about the cultural differences from home life to definitely lab. Did you notice, because there's a lot more women in science, did you notice any issues of having to navigate what is often a very male world?
Yeah, actually, one main experience that has been burned into my brain was I went to a conference when I was with SP3. And so I was like freshly out of college, and it was me and my boss, and my boss happens to be, or at that time happened to be, an older white male. And he's talking to this vendor, and I'm standing next to my boss, and this vendor, I didn't really realize it, but he was like kind of cutting off the circle. He was getting like closer and closer to my boss. And so I kind of just walked around my boss and recreated that circle. And then afterwards, my boss was like, did you see what he did there? And I was like, no. He was like, he was kind of boxing you out. Like, there was no need for him to talk to me. He just wanted to talk to my boss. And it was, 2 males. And I was just like, I had no idea what was even going on. I just thought he had no spatial awareness. I'm a tiny person. I'm just gonna move myself over here so I can be present. So there's instances like that have happened, but subconsciously I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna represent myself, instead of like, I mean, at that time I didn't know it was happening, but in a situation like that, you just make yourself seen again, you make yourself heard again. That can be taken in whatever context it is. So as a small person, it tends to be like, oh, I'm bossy, or I'm whatever word you want to use there, and it's like, so what, I will make myself present and known, which you are well aware of. So
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, sometimes it reminds me of also like, the like code switching as well, right? Kind of you have to like, or some part of your story, and in the context of this also reminds me of that, right? The endless code switching that goes on between
yes.
how I would talk in my own culture or my own, or, you know, my own friends compared to, you know, the way I would talk at work. And, you know, the need to talk in a very Eurocentric way to be heard. And so, yeah, it brings back some of those things too. That's a thank you. Any other questions? Let's see, there's a lot of good comments in here too. Thanking you, a couple, you know,
Yes, I have the chat open.
So,
Thank you, everybody.
um,
You know, with regard to the code switching, I would say it got a lot easier in grad school just because you have this blurred line of your personal life, your relaxation time, and your work, because it all kind of just mumbles together. And you know, Josh can speak to this as well. So I really found myself dropping my code switch a lot in grad school because grad schools are really already hard enough. I don't have the mental capacity. So, you know, the way I would talk at home with Josh or something just ended up the way that I was too tired. So I would just talk like that in lab to my professor or something like that. So it happens, but I think it's a matter of, at least for myself, getting more and more comfortable with who I am. And it's like, hey, yeah, this is just how I talk. If you perceive it like it's attitude, that's not my problem. You can ask me about it if you have a question.
we do have another minute for another question. If anybody's interested in, you know, could be anything along her journey, something that she didn't talk about that you may be curious about, definitely feel free.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing with us. I'm kind of in the same situation. I'm gonna graduate almost in my 30s or early 30s, and it makes me feel really good that, you know, I can see success in your life,
Yes.
and I believe that I can reach it too. And thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. But you can, you know, again, can't compare yourself to the person sitting next to you or anything like that. Your success looks like your success. You're where you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Try hard, find the opportunities, show up.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
Yeah, thank you.
And Joshua, you had your hand up?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm coming through.
Okay, now you are. Yes.
You are, yes.
I'm not hearing anybody else now.
We can
That's
hear you.
confusing. Okay, thank you. Just that you mentioned at one point the application of the long string proteins that you were trying to form.
Yes.
It's like in electronics. And I don't know if I've even heard of that before, as proteins being like the circuit or like the traces in electronics.
Yeah, they were being, they serve as the wires. So one thing that I didn't show was actually like the second paper that we published out of that project was we were actually able to attach nanoparticles to these protein strings and then extend the nanoparticles to make silver wires. And that was successful as well. And we wrote a paper on that.
Awesome. That's great. I hadn't heard of that either. So go ahead, Josh.
So Maria, sorry to cut you off. I teach a class at one.
I just saw your comment. Yeah.
So I got to get going. I was telling some of my students are here as well. Thank you so much again. This was an amazing presentation. I'm really glad I heard it.
Thank you, Josh.
Yes. And we'll get